this thing out. Testing.
Can you hear me in the back?
Yes.
Does anybody in the back even want to hear me in the back? First of all, thank you very much for taking the time to be here, and especially appreciate the invitation to be here to explain Proposition 1. It is a constitutional amendment. It is the only constitutional amendment on the ballot. There's a lot of confusion about what it does and how it does it. And I thought what I would try to do is, go ahead and go to the next one, is take you through an I always like more people know about a problem, they can work their way to a solution. So I'm going to take the time to try to work you through what the problem is with transportation funding in Texas, and then go into Proposition 1, how it works so that you can actually go and explain it to someone else. And I'm not going to get so much into what we need to do next session because I'm focused between now and November. So why don't you go ahead and go to, I also want to mention before I get into it that everybody has a different opinion of what a core function of government is. My background is I'm an engineer. I don't live in Austin, I live in Jacksonville. I built my own businesses, hired people, made payroll, and was city councilman because I got mad at a bunch of issues like yourselves. But getting mad and solving problems is two different things. And so in the transportation funding, the traditional funding for Texas for many, many decades has been I call it a three-legged stool. It's the fuel tax, both state and federal, and the vehicle registration fees. Two of those legs, the fuel tax, are crumbling. They are a dying revenue source for the department. And it's for several reasons. Go ahead and go to the next one. If you look at the charts, even if you may not can see the numbers, the blue line is the fuel efficiency of your vehicle. It has continued to increase ever since I was little. You know, we used to run 10, 12 miles per gallon when I was a kid. They're running 18, 20, and sometimes 30 gallons per miles per gallon. It's projected to get up in over 40 miles per gallon in just a few decades. And so two things have happened there. One is you're driving more miles on the same gallon, and the fuel tax is 20 cents per gallon. So if you double the mileage, that is the equivalent of cutting the tax in half. But that's just one part. The second part is the purchasing power. Since it's been 20 cents a gallon for 24 years. 1991 is the last fuel tax increase at the state or federal level. I haven't found anybody that's real excited about filing a bill to raise the fuel tax. And we've had governors who would veto it if we did. So no one's going to go there. But the reason I pointed out is that at the same time we've held that 20 cents solid, the purchasing power from construction costs. Consumer price index in those 24 years has increased 61%. Highway construction index, which is like consumer price index, has increased 151% in those 24 years. The cost to build, maintain, and those kind of things on the road. So if you only took the fuel tax and just adjusted it for inflation, 150% times 20 cents would have you at 50 cents a gallon. But we did not do that. The other thing we did not do was adjust it for the fuel efficiency. Because if you adjusted it for the fuel efficiency, the 50 cents would then be $1. And so you can see there's no way we would be able to get from 20 cents a gallon to $1 a gallon to put us at the same place on funding-wise we were 24 years ago. The second thing I thought I would try to point out is terminology. So go ahead and go to the next one. In transportation funding, when most people talk about funding, they think in terms of maintenance money and construction money. And most people, it doesn't matter if you're a state rep or your state senator or your mayors or county judges stuff, the terminology gets off a little bit here because maintenance is mowing, striping, patching, things of that nature. Construction can be rebuilding of a road. And that's the thing most people kind of forget, that roads and bridges do not last forever. The average life expectancy statewide is about 40 years. West Texas, where it's dry and hard ground, it lasts longer. In East Texas, if you get on the coastal areas where there's not much rocks and there's a lot of moisture, they last less time. So every so often you have to overhaul it. And so then we take construction and break it into rehabilitation, in other words, overhauling that road, and new capacity. So when people are seeing congestion or safety projects, you're asking for a new capacity type project. On the maintenance side, go ahead and drop down the next one. I use the word preservation, which includes maintenance and the overhauling of the roads, because that is what a road, if it just stays the same for your lifetime, we need to preserve that road. And the cost to preserve the road in its lifetime, in other words, a 40-year life cycle, is about 3 times the original construction cost. So if TxDOT spends $100 million building a new highway, in the next 40 years, you better have $300 million worth of revenue to preserve that road, or it will deteriorate. And what has happened is the entire foreign market system in the state of Texas was built after World War II, primarily the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s. It's 42,000 miles of roadway. The entire interstate system for all of the United States, east to west, north to south, is 45,000 miles. The Texas foreign market is 42,000 miles. It's about 40 or 50 years old. The entire interstate system in Texas was completed, the last mile was completed in 1972. So that's 70s, 80s, 90s, teens, we're right at 50, hitting the 50-year button. So all that system that we built is reaching that life cycle and will have to be rebuilt. At the same time, we have 96% of all the people moving into the urban areas, the small urbans and big urban. You're a small urban. We've got all that rural area out there. So I want to talk about the next chart, preservation. All right, JD. Dollars going up, time going right. It's a conceptual chart, but it's real. The cost to preserve the system, I'm talking about the statewide system, goes up every year. It'll go up because of age of the system. It will go up because of inflation. It will go up because there's more people driving on it. It will go up because the weights are heavier. The cost to preserve goes up, up, up. The next chart is our traditional funding. Those 3 that I mentioned a while ago are on a very flat curve. It's almost 0.5% per year. And very shortly, we'll start actually heading down. And so what happens is, go ahead to the next one. As long as your traditional funding, which is the red line, is above the cost to preserve, the money in between is what you have for new capacity, safety projects, things of that nature. The Texas A&M University in Bryan College Station has a special transportation institute. They call it the Texas Transportation Institute. They are the ones that do some of the main transportation research. I showed them that chart at the beginning of last session. I had just been appointed chairman of transportation. I've been doing transportation for almost 17 years. I drew those 2 simple lines, put them on the chalkboard, and said those lines are going to cross. When they cross, 2 things happen. One, you have no money for new capacity. Number 2, you cannot preserve the system. The system will slowly begin to deteriorate when those lines cross. And so they said, we agree with you, Senator. When do you think they will cross? I said, I think they crossed 12 years ago. I've been waving this flag since 1997. Those lines crossed, I said, 12 years ago. They said, at A&M, we have the information, and we're going to run a computer model. We're going to try to figure out where that line crosses. That's the next one. That's the chart they brought me. If you can't see where the red is the new capacity, it feathers out and literally goes away. At about 2002, 2003, there's almost nothing there at that point. And so we hit that point about 12 years ago. And go ahead and go to the next one. The big system of ours, that goes all the way back to 1921. But get into the World War, after World War II period. Hit the middle of that, about 1960, is 33% of the state budget went to funding the transportation system. That big system that we built, that we're all proud of as Texans, was built, and it was typically 25 to 30% of the entire state budget went to funding that. And then all of a sudden, if you follow that over to the right, it drops down significantly. It drops from 25% down to 10, and it did it in a 2-year period. And the reason it did, they said, okay, we have now built it. FM system's complete, interstate system's complete, and what happened in the 70s? The priorities of the budget and the general revenues went to social programs. And so the core function of the state, like education, core function in this case being transportation, kind of dithered back and forth a little above 10%, and 2014 we're at 9%. But if you drive around the state, go to the Metroplex, go to Houston, go to Austin, you see construction projects everywhere. And if we ran out of money 12 years ago, but we're building all this stuff, that doesn't make sense. People tell me it doesn't make sense. If we have no money, how can we build it? And go to the next one. The legislature recognized they had a problem about 10 or 12 years ago. And every session since, they have gone in and every other session borrowed money. In 2001, Texas Mobility Fund, they took driver's license fee, inspection fees, took those revenue streams and put them into one fund and said, okay, TxDOT, you can borrow against that. Well, TxDOT did, and it also went to the public. The public voted on this. That created $6.9 billion. It's kind of a rolling debt. 2003, opposition 14, $6 billion in debt. 07, $5 billion in debt. In the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex in 2008, they took the entire toll system that was almost paid off, they put it up for collateral, and took $3.2 billion in debt, not to build new toll roads that generate revenues, but to build other things in Dallas. And that's one of the reasons you've got that. But you created a debt. That's not a state debt, but that's a debt those people in that region are going to be paying. One-time federal stimulus in 09, and then there's a program called Pass-Through, $1.9 billion. The point is, the very last line, $23 billion in debt. It will take over $31 billion to pay that back. We did that. I got in the legislature about 2007. But this year, we had so many different programs that were brought to the legislature, again, to create new types of debt for transportation. And we all got together and said, we're not going to do that. We are not going to borrow our way out of this problem. We need to come up with something else. We estimate that the shortfall in transportation for this state is between $4 billion a year and $5 billion a year. If you didn't do anything but take the original numbers I gave you from 1991, the 20 cents fuel tax and the $60 vehicle registration fee, if you only adjusted it for inflation and maybe a little bit of efficiency, you would be at that number. So we're trying to get back to the type of funding we had for transportation back then. And see, before we go forward, I want to get some definitions. Okay, severance tax. A lot of people have heard of severance tax. This is a lot of oil and gas in East Texas, but it's a tax paid on the production of oil and gas removed from the ground. I don't know why they call it severance tax, other than you sever the minerals. It's been on the books for many, many years. Second thing I want is the Economic Stabilization Fund, ESF. Savings account created in 1988. That's the one that a lot of people refer to as the rainy day fund. And it was created in 1987, and I'll show you why. Go ahead and go to the next one. This chart is the actual collections of the severance tax from the state that goes all the way back to 1970. And it's kind of interesting because it follows some of the history that many of us have lived through. If you go back to 1970, the whole state collection was $250 million. That's 1/4 of $1 billion. 250 million. And as you get close to the early 80s, you'll see that line bubble up. That was the big oil boom in the early 80s. The huge demand, oil shot up to the unbelievably high price of $40 a barrel. And 25% of this money, all of it, goes to schools. I'll show you the little formula after a while. But all the rest of it goes to the general revenue, in other words, a big checking account. So all of a sudden, the budget writers, who were used to getting a portion of the $250 million, all of a sudden were getting deposits once a year, over $2 billion a year. It's a huge increase, it's about 10 times. And guess what? They started spending it. You know, put it here, they put it here, and they put it here. And everybody was flush in cash in the early 80s. Then all of a sudden, the oil boom busted. And so that severance tax went down, and you can see that was 1987. So they went through a recession in 1987 at the legislature, and they said, you know, we have got to fix this thing. We cannot have our state budget float up and down like that. So they said,